Hey, I'm Will LaVeist. He's Eric ClaVille. You're tuned into LaVeist and ClaVille. We give it to you straight the way it is from a black male's perspective. Getting right to the show. NFL and HBCUs, broken promises. You know, recently there's been, in this era that we're in, with heightened racial awareness, HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, have gotten an increased attention, and particularly in the area of sports, the NFL and also the NBA. But recently, the NFL draft happened, and there was not one HBCU player who was drafted. And you go back to the last year's draft, there was only one that was actually drafted. But in this particular year, the expectation was that there would be a closer look at HBCU talent, which is clearly there. And so there's been some surprise as to why there was not even one player drafted. So Deion Sanders, who along the way, obviously Hall of Fame player, went to Florida State University, which is nearby to Florida A&M. So he's very familiar with HBCUs, and he's now the head coach at Jackson State, which brought a lot of fanfare, a lot of attention of this potential movement of a lot more NFL players. He's not the first to go and coach at HBCU, nor the first to be at the level and recognize the talent. But in this current climate, it certainly has raised the attention that black college football is quality football. But how is it that that's the case?
Yeah.
You get not one player being drafted.
Will, to Deion Sanders' credit, he's brought a lot of positive notoriety to HBCUs and their football teams and programs recently. Now, before that time period, some of the greatest players came from HBCUs.
Absolutely.
In fact, you had some big-time sports leagues and teams that would exclusively drafters from certain HBCUs, such as Southern University and Grambling State University with Eddie Robinson. You had Coach Mumford at Southern. You had John McClendon at North Carolina Central. You had all these great coaches, of yesteryear that produced the Mel Blunts, that produced the Jerry Rices. The list goes on and on. The Walter Payton and the like. Aeneas Williams, I think about the most recent Hall of Fame from Southern University. So he's brought again great notoriety currently and recently to a new group of consumers of sports.
Right.
And with all of that, to their credit, the sports networks, they picked up on the games. They gave a lot of positive airplay. They gave a lot of positive light to historical struggles and injustices and so forth. But, Will, it all boils down to having a seat at the table and cash money. And this past NFL draft, Deion Sanders was livid. And out of 7 rounds, over 200 and some odd players, in the first 3-4 picks, you had a D2 player go as in a high-profile position. And hats off to him in that particular team that produced a lot of players now. But not one player from HBCU was
Division One from a Division One.
From a Division One, exactly. From a Division One, not one was drafted. Now, you did get some. They got calls, of course, through the agents to come, try out and so forth. But it's nothing like hearing your name called, right?
Right.
Well, no one can ever take away that you were drafted in the 5th round, the 3rd round, the 2nd, the 1st, the 6th, even the 7th, even Mr. Irrelevant. Exactly. No one can take that away from you. Hearing your name, all those years of working, Pop Warner, backyard football, or when we used to play sideline hit in the street, hit each other. All these games, man, throw up and catch, right? Throw it up, catch and run, right? Tap you and then go. All of this time that you played, middle school, high school, college, grinding in the gym, and you don't get your name called. You can't tell me. player didn't deserve it.
Yeah, I mean, it's impactful because, again, and to be clear, not getting drafted does not necessarily mean that you're not going to make it in the NFL, that you're not going to be able to, that you're not a quality player. In fact, there have been, as a result of not getting drafted, there's still been players who have gotten free agent contracts at this point too. So not being drafted doesn't mean you're not going to make it, and being drafted doesn't mean that you're not going to, that you are going to make it. However, to not be drafted, to have this increased focus on HBCU athleticism and to not be drafted does, in a sense, kind of signal and say, well, is there really the talent level? Is there really the quality at those schools? And you and I know that is definitely the case. And I think that is one of the reasons why, and I'm glad that Deion Sanders is doing this, is that he's holding sort of a satellite, sort of a pro day for the NFL to actually be able to see and showcase this talent. He's planning to do this in the month of June. And again, yes, there are nuances. There are certain positions that get greater attention in the NFL. Like, for example, the quarterback position is one. So if you've got some talent, even if it's at the Division II level, that the person has some skill set that they feel that they can work with, they'll draft you. At the running back position, there's a less of an emphasis because there's a feeling that running backs, you can pick up. Running backs are not a position that lasts, that has as long of a career. And there are a lot of guys who can run the ball, or they can make allowances. They can design their offensives in such a way that the running back is not as crucial. But, to not get a player drafted at all, is problematic. And I wonder if, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but I wonder if in some ways that's also a signal to potential players coming out to say, hey, if you go to HBCUs, you may not get drafted to go to the league. So maybe, maybe that's the reason you want to look over here at this predominantly white institution, because we're going to get you at least an opportunity to get drafted. And that's a potential message that is being heard that I hope is not one that sticks.
Yeah. And, like you said, going to a D1 does not ensure that you're going to get drafted, even going to one of the best institutions. One of my classmates, his son was a high-profile player coming out of high school and into college, went to the top football program in the country, but ended up not getting drafted because of injuries and so forth. So sometimes life happens. But he was in a great position, and he did get a free agent call, right, in order to, showcase his skills in the league. But I want to move back to, what Deion Sanders is doing. So in light of this past draft of not one African-American player, and I say African-American, but one player from HBCU being drafted, he is holding a one-day camp for coaches to ensure that this will not happen again. Now, the question becomes what this will entail. Will there be scouts there? Will there be individuals from the NFL, corporate office there? What would this entail? What would happen? But the fact that that's to be determined. But the fact that he's doing it, the fact that this is something that he is moving in a direction to bring light to, I think, again, is another positive. So we know that there's been a trend. Former stars in NFL wanting to pivot toward coaching and go straight into head coaching at HBCUs. So that's become a minor trend, of course, with Tennessee State, Eddie George, of course, at Southern University, my alma mater, Marshall Faulks, put his hat in the ring.
Expressed some interest. Yeah.
He expressed interest, and they ended up hiring, after Coach Odom left and came here to Norfolk State University, we ended up hiring the assistant under Odom that was there. So, we see this trend happening. This is a good trend, many see, because of the notoriety, again, that's coming. Sometimes, notoriety is good, even though it may not be the best talent or the best person at that time. But notoriety is good because it brings a lot of attention to your program. So with this being the case, the question becomes, how can we now leverage this attention? How can we leverage what is happening to our institutions in order to, again, have a seat at the table? Make sure that our players are drafted, our players are in the league, that our kids are not, quote unquote, coming here, giving it their all and not having an opportunity to succeed. I'll give you another quick example. A young man who, his father and I are very good friends and grew up the church that we attended when we were in college and got our start there, raised our family there. Our son got baptized there. My wife and I taught his son Sunday school and so forth. We watched that young man grow. He became the all-time leading rusher in the SWAC. He became beat out Walter Payton in his numbers. This is a little young man we saw come up. When they played Georgia, it took several individuals, defenders, to bring him down. He scored the only touchdown on a running play on the University of Georgia Bulldog defense. This is how good this young man was. But the opportunities for scouts to see him, the all-time leading rusher in the history of a sports conference, did not get the looks that other running backs were getting at these D1 schools. Now, he did end up playing with the Tennessee Titans, Green Bay Packers, ended up getting hurt. But Lenard Tillery III, that's that young man. He's got a documentary out now that you can see. Yeah. That was well produced, that talked about his journey, from a walk-on under Coach Odom, who's here now in Norfolk State, and battling every season. But, again, putting in the work. And I remember us giving him one of our weight benches when we were getting ready to move, Will. But again, that just highlights the quality of players, solid family, solid background, solid all the way out, but not getting an opportunity. So how do we change that narrative, Will?
Well, I think that one of the things we have to leverage is the unique and quality experience that students get when attending an HBCU. So one of the drawing points is you can come to these schools and you're going to have a full, well-rounded college experience, as opposed to going to many of the big-time major D1 schools where so much of why you're there is strictly about playing sports. Now, yes, a lot of students also in that context are able to get their degrees. They're able to have experiences and relationships on campus. But if you talk to any of the D1 players, like I remember, I went to grad school, University of Arizona Wildcats, bear down, right?
Okay.
And spent a lot of time with the ball players on the football team, basketball team. And they were often telling me about the level of practices that they were having to go to, the tutors that they needed to actually have them enable them to be able to stay eligible and get through school. They often ask me about the HBCU experience that I had and craved that, and say, man, they really wish that they could have had that kind of experience. Wow. So it's not to say that if you go to an HBCU, you're not going to be practicing at the same level. Again, the quality, as you just eloquently stated, of being able to play is there. The ability to maximize your talent on the gridiron is going to be there. But one of the things that we can leverage is this unique cultural experience, as along with the quality education that you're going to get. So we can be encouraging students to come to these schools and say, you're going to graduate. We're going to create an environment where you're going to be successful. You're going to have a great cultural experience. You're going to graduate. There's nothing like an HBCU football game with the band and the crowd and that whole vibe that for your cultural experience. I think another thing that we have to do is you have to leverage and you have to improve the facilities in areas where the facilities aren't as great as they could be. And many of our schools have excellent facilities. Do they match the level of Alabama, USC? course not. All the wealth, all of the monies that's been put into those institutions to build those facilities like that. Yeah, but you got a lot of schools that have quality facilities, and that's oftentimes is this misnomer that if you go there, the facilities are so inferior that you're never going to be able. That's bull. There are plenty of schools that take their sports, take football. In this case, we're talking about football seriously, and they have great facilities that you're going to be able to maximize your ability. So we got to leverage those things. Great experience, great education, quality facilities, quality ball.
Will, you mentioned, the facilities at the Alabamas and the other D1 schools, the LSUs and the SEC and all around.
Notre Dame. I mean, who does have facilities? A lot of schools don't have facilities that come to those levels. You're right.
Absolutely. But they get these facilities. Keep in mind, it's not that the schools are wealthier just automatically. But the conferences leveraging the contracts with the TV rights, the TV contract. And this is where we get into amateurism, right? Amateur athletes or athletes who are student athletes, where, we can bring in $1 billion a year, $1 billion a year. That's what the NCAA March Madness brings in, $1 billion a year, right? For several weeks, everybody's tuned into their TV for one shining moment type of play, right? And what ends up happening is that those schools now they divide that money up, for people who are looking. So that's why you see in schools that were juggernauts in the past, but they have the TV contracts like the Notre Dames that really aren't getting over the hump competing with the other schools. But back in the day, they were the team to beat, but they leveraged their entity as an independent school with ABC network, and they get all of that revenue, right? And then you have the boosters around the country and the alums that pour into and support the institutions. Now, we support our teams as well, but at the end of the day, if you're vice president of a company and you're a manager or you're a worker, the level of support financially is just totally different, right? So when we take a look and understand where that money comes from, Will, now the question becomes, since we know we have the talent, since we know we have the overall experience that HBCUs give, since we know that we have the passion behind it, we got the quality families and athletes, what I just mentioned, with Chiller III overcoming the odds from walk-on to all-time great at Southern University. Now, Will, what is the next step to put it all together to leverage this package with the TV stations, with the leagues and the like? Where do we go?
I think where we go is exactly what you said about identifying all of those assets and also looking at all of the different other channels that are available for marketing your product. I mean, it's the major networks without knowing all of the ins and outs, because I'll acknowledge I don't know all of the ins and outs of the economics of sports and the conferences and the networks. But with all of these other distribution channels that we have available to us that are upsetting other areas of TV marketing, it seems to me that there are opportunities there to be able to get in front of people and to put a product in front of people that folks would buy into. And I think that also what we've seen with the major networks being willing to broadcast the HBCU games, that we need to exemplify to heighten that. And again, I was watching, for example, this past weekend, the Spring League. NFL's got a league where it's a developmental league showing spring ball. A lot of the ball players, in fact, there were a lot of HBCU players that were in the game. And it was actually a very high quality football game. Now, we've seen the XFL, we've seen all of these different leagues come along. Arena football come along, right? It's telling you that there is something there, if marketed right, if you hit the right tone, that people will buy into. Now, the spring league, true, there's no salaries tied to it at all. That's one of the that's one of the angles of it, because I can imagine that if you had to pay all of these salaries along with providing these opportunities, it's going to cut into the profit margin. But I think that it's about being innovative and looking at all of the distribution channels that are now out here. If we just sat and said you can only go through NBC or CBS or Fox or ESPN, then you would have no Netflix, for example. If you just sat back and said, we can't do anything other than the major networks, there would be no Netflix. So when I talk about looking at the other distribution channels, it's about being innovative and taking this unique product and taking it out to the marketplace in new and innovative ways. People are looking at viewing content on their phones. What could the HBCUs do to market that product in a way that people will digest it on their phones and you'll be able to generate revenue? So you just got to be innovative and creative.
You mentioned innovative, creative, and raise awareness. I want to talk about what Chris Paul did during the bubble. Every seems like every day, Chris Paul, the point guard now for the Phoenix Suns, who they call the walking Hall of Famer, he had on a different HBCU sweatshirt or sweatpants or some type of apparel every single day, showcasing, giving love to HBCUs. And we saw other players, show that as well. And then he even had a movement where you sign up for a certain app, and whatever spare change you have, you could donate to your HBCU and so forth. I saw that was something that I thought was we've seen many entities do. We saw it on the Cosby Show where Bill Cosby would wear
some type of product placement. Essentially, it's called product placement advertising.
Yeah, and Living Single, they used to have it on their show, going back to the 80s and 90s, where it was a black show, quality black shows. See, like every time you turn your head, there's a new Lorenz Tate, Nia Long movie that's coming out, or something of that nature. But again, that product placement, but it showed you, oh, there's my school. Did you guys see that? And your friends are asking you, where's that university? Where's that university? But we see the momentum is a lot of hype, Will, but then the monetization and the recognition, it drops off a cliff. So I think that the challenge now is, and you touched on it a little bit, the challenge now is how do we create a model where it stays, it sticks, where now every university is not going to be a blue blood, right? Kind of like we talk about basketball, the Kentuckys, the Dukes, the North Carolinas, the Indianas, the UCLAs, the Kansases. No, everybody's not going to be that blue blood. You may have some that are startups that are staples for a while, like the VCUs, the Butlers, and the like. And then you have everyone else kind of in the middle that compete at a very high level and can win it at any given year, right? But how do we create that model, that marketing model, to ensure that we always are in the conversation, we're always in the forefront, and we're always there to get a piece of the pie? Because, again, we talked about billions of dollars, man. Billions of dollars from student athletes. The amortization of college sports is really what it's become. And to ensure that they're able to represent the university, but the university gets its due.
Well, I think, again, part of it is in the spirit of being innovative and thinking outside of the box. You think about this big, wide world that we have in other continents that this content could be marketed to. So you got the continent of Africa, you got Asia, you got South America, you got other places where this content could be marketed to. So again, thinking about, for example, a lot of in the movie industry and how there are movies that begin in the United States, but then there's overseas marketing, overseas distribution that happens that generates revenue. So there's a lot of movies that do maybe mediocre in the United States, but then overseas in Europe or somewhere in another continent, they do a lot better. So you have to look at those kinds of things and say, okay, one of the key markets for any university, it's this international market. You know, a lot of drawing international students are coming to a university. So can we market HBCU football? Can we market HBCU basketball to some of these other markets? And in there, package and sell and talk about the schools and the quality of schools. I mean, there's distance learning that's going on that doesn't necessarily require someone to come and get on a plane or get on a boat and come physically to your school. So again, those are the kinds of things that I think about, is how, with the distribution channels that we have and the abilities that we have to reach people, not only here in the States, but in other markets, with this product that we have, can we package it in a way that other people will pay for? Because as you said, the advertising, it's really about having content that advertisers can put their products around in order to get in front of people. So if folks are enjoying watching HBCU football or basketball over in Africa, then all the advertiser is looking at is, do you have eyeballs that I can run ads
on that product?
On that product, you know? So that's what I look at. I say, man, we got other economies that could be reached. You know, you got other, again, this is like why a lot of jazz artists have gone over to Europe and gone over to other areas. You think of a lot of musicians that maybe they didn't break through, or maybe their careers hit a lull in the United States. And they went overseas and did quite well and developed great following. So I think that kind of thinking is what could be applied here too.
Well, I think you're exactly right. And you talk about going overseas. Let's look at sports. You know, again, going back in your neck of the woods, you know, NYC, New York, you got Stephon Marbury that left.
That's right. He's an icon in China. Who would have thought somebody from Coney Island? Who would have thought Coney Island, Brooklyn, Coney Island? He's a athletic, a basketball icon in China.
Yeah. I mean, so you're talking a country that has close to 30% of the world population. Mm-hmm. You're talking about a country that's creating more millionaires every day than any country in the world. Right. You're talking about a country who is definitely the number 2 economy in the world and really rising to compete with the United States in the very near future. And Stephon Marbury got ahead of the curve, went to China, and like you said, now, you know, his name is probably bigger than Kobe Bryant, you know, the late great Kobe Bryant who's over there. I mean, who passed away. And he's probably a little bit lower than Yao Ming, of course.
I mean, he's probably bigger than Jordan in terms of basketball and China and being an icon. He's got the statue out there. Yeah. So that's an opening. Again, there's an appreciation for Black culture that happens in other continents that's different than here. So why not market that and do it in that way?
You know, Will, I love the way you're thinking, you know, and I want to also draw the point where during the summers, you know, there was, you know, some of the Golden State Warriors and LeBron hold camps. They were holding camps overseas in China and Asia and so forth, capitalizing on that. And I remember back in the day, Grambling State University band, Eddie Robinson, football coach in the band, I think they were invited to Japan on a couple of occasions to go play. So, you know, is that marketing, like you said, of our culture, creating that market for it, and then understanding, you know, where we fit in the big picture. And then all of a sudden, when our stock is here, make sure we own it first. Exactly. But when our stock is here, use it to have a seat at the table. Don't sell, or as my wife would say, throw your pearls to the swine, right?
Yeah, because, I mean, that has been the case. It's not like our culture hasn't been marketed. We just haven't always, and oftentimes have not reaped the benefits of the capital benefits, the financial benefits of that marketing. And I think that HBCUs as an institution, if they can combine forces and go in a packaged kind of way. I mean, I know Lincoln University, my alma mater, being in CIAA basketball tournament continues to this day to be, even though it's Division II, continues to be the probably premier basketball tournament in terms of being a cultural experience that people go to and people engage. And the ball that's played by both the men and the women is high quality basketball. So we should be able to market that tournament and other tournaments like that creatively,
Yeah, and when we talk about the premier football game of HBCUs, it's the Bayou Classic. That's on national TV every year between Southern University, my alma mater, and Grambling State University in the Superdome in New Orleans, Louisiana, where we would sell out the Superdome when the Saints were the Aints, but we would sell it out 60,000, beautiful, proud Black people and alums of HBCUs. Well, that's a wrap for us again. Thank you so much for joining us here on LaVeist and ClaVille. I want to give a quick plug again. Walk On to All-Time Great. Check it out. It's a great story, and he really encompasses what we're talking about on this show, where we have HBCUs that are producing some of the best and the greatest athletes, not of yesterday, not just the Jerry Rices and the Walter Paytons of yesterday, but also today. Follow us on our social media at LaVeist and ClaVille. And to us, that's the way we see it, and that's the way it is. Until next time, be well.